welcome, Amy. Where did you say you go to law school?
I go to the University of Connecticut.
Okay, awesome. Hopefully, well, it's your first day, right? I believe that's correct. Hopefully they don't treat you well. You let us know. Okay, it is 6:04 p.m. And I'm going to call this meeting to order. We'll start with a board member roll call. This is Paul Ashton, chair, present. We'll do Kurt.
Jeff Tignor, member present.
Kurt Vondren, present.
Bobby Strang, member present.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. It doesn't appear that we have anyone from the public for the public comment period, so we can roll forward into approval of the board meeting minutes from November 19th. So if folks want to take a minute to review those. Whenever. Is there a motion?
I would move we approve the minutes as presented.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That seems unanimous to me. The meeting minutes are approved. And that moves us into old business, which there is none of. Correct, Mike?
That's correct.
So do you want to go ahead with the agency report?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you again, board members. I wanted to give you a report on our activities for the last 2 months since our last meeting, and I just want to highlight some things from the written report that's already been forwarded to you. Our operational status continues to be fully operational in the office with partial telework is our status, as we are still in phase 2 of DC government reopening. As far as the presidential inauguration activities, there is no report. As far as demonstration activities, there was no demonstration activity over the past week since the incident at the Capitol. There were 2 demonstrations that were scheduled on Inauguration Day that the Park Service had issued permits for. Both of those demonstrations were canceled by the demonstration organizers, so they did not occur, and we did not have any need for any monitoring activity for the past week or so. We'll continue monitoring events to see if we've got to mobilize some monitoring teams or not, but in the near future, I don't see a need arising for that right now. Some important news regarding our budget that I wanted you to be aware of. Even though the board is typically not involved in our day-to-day budget operations, you may recall that it has affected our operations in that we were given almost an 11% pay cut, not a pay cut, but a budget-wide reduction in our overall operational budget, as were most other DC government agencies at the beginning of the fiscal year. We filed our necessary complaints via protocol with the budget office and the mayor's office as far as how that affected our budget, because the resulting budget meant that we had to cut positions and we had to cut our general operating budget right down to past the bare bones part of it because the level of our budget, with 95% of it being payroll and salaries, even a nominal budget cut starts affecting our operational readiness. Well, our appeals were going to be heard because about half of that budget cut was restored just this past week by the mayor's budget office. We're looking at now how that exactly is going to affect us, because it's coming in the middle of the year, and how we can utilize the funds that are being given back to us and what's going to be carried over to the next year, because that affects how and whether we do any new staff hiring with the carryover amounts, because these budget cuts are continuing into the next fiscal year. So more to come on that. Overall, it's good news that we have part of our, almost half of our budget cuts have been restored. So that's going to help us out a whole lot and give us some breathing space for the rest of this fiscal year. So that's big news. The other big news item for critical issues is the Police Reform Commission. Kurt Voinman is on that commission, and I understand that he's meeting again later tonight. The board, that commission continues to meet. They now have a date, I believe if I'm correct, Kurt, of March 31st to present recommendations to the community and the council.
We received an extension, yes.
All right. And I'm not sure at this time, Kurt, if you wanted to inform the board of any other further developments with the commission.
Still a work in progress, but the policy reports that this board has already done, and Mike has contributed to the discussion. All that's been tremendously helpful, and I think the commission is heading towards pushing forward some of the things that this board has long asked for.
All right, thanks. Thank you. I'm continuing on with the board report then. There's a couple items regarding staffing updates. We were able to hire a new investigator back in last month in December. That hiring process started before all of these pay reductions really started affecting us. And we hired a new investigator, Tamika Walker. We were on track to hire 2 new investigators, but the salary budget reductions did not allow us to do that. And we also were able to hire a new investigations clerk, Sherry Mendoza. Some of you may have spoken to her already. She's taking over on the investigations clerk side of things. And both of those employees are well into their training phase already, and have already picked up cases and are already doing a really good job in their new positions. Interns, Amy already introduced herself as a law intern. She's working remotely. She is an unpaid intern during the semester, but she's getting, I presume you're getting semester credit for your internship. We have not hired, and we don't intend on hiring any interns for the rest of this academic school year, because they could only be appearing remotely, and that will not work right now for the investigation section and media and public relations section. But we'll look at that again for the next summer semester, and we'll see what situation we're in with COVID and with the budget at that point. We keep continually reevaluating that. I wanted to also mention that we've also maintained a freeze on all of our training and all of our conferences for the rest of the year, and we'll continue looking at that. But what the staff is doing is a lot of in-house training through DCHR. They have a lot of training opportunities for employees, everything from wellness, like yoga classes, to all the way to junior leadership classes, management classes, and organizational change classes. They have probably well over 100 different courses that DC employees can take, and we've encouraged them, and they are taking many of those courses, and those are not charged to us as an agency. So that's a good thing. I reserved a spot on the board report to talk about the fiscal year 20 annual report. The board does not vote on it. That report was released last week. I'll reserve that for new business under the new business agenda, but for now I'd like to just move on and conclude this board report with Mona Andrews giving us a summary of the statistics for the past 2 months. Mona?
Yes, good evening. As you guys see, the good thing is that even though we weren't able to fill both investigative positions, that we are continuing to keep up with our cases, due in part to the fact that for the first time in about 3 years, we're actually at a decrease in new cases, new complaints. The last 2 months, I do internal case stats every month, beginning of every month. The last 2 months, it's been consistently about 14% decrease. I just did a on date year-to-date review before we came on for today, and we're about a 10% decrease, which is only, 25, 30 cases typically, but that does make a difference, especially when we're, down an investigator and then training a new investigator. So that's been helpful in helping us keep up and even get a little ahead in the sense of our caseload's much lower. As you can see, our open cases are hovering around 100 as compared to the last couple of years. That's good. So that's the highlight. But we did, we have been getting more cases in the last couple of weeks, and summer is typically our busier time anyway, so we'll see what happens with that. I don't think there's anything. Everything else seems fairly consistent, other than just lower, a little bit of a decrease in our new cases that we've been getting over the last few months. Really, we've seen a decrease. So, any questions?
Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you very much, Mona. I wanted to emphasize in your excellent report that you just gave that the total open cases are 97 versus 159 this time last year, I think. And that's even with really about the same number of complaints. And I think one of the reasons that we highlighted this in our annual report, this is kind of a segue into our the next item on the agenda, which is the under new business item 7, the fiscal year 20 annual report, and that is that it took about an average of a little bit over 90 days, 3 months, to close a case over the past year or year and a half, and that's really to close most of our cases in 90 days is really a phenomenal rate of case completions. One of the reasons for that, I think, and this is also highlighted in the annual report, is that in the past we were doing about at least 250 officer interviews every year, almost at least one or two every working day of the year. And now with body-worn cameras, we're doing under 200, under 180 or so, almost 90 or so fewer officer interviews every year, and that saves a lot of time. Some of that time is made up by having to watch the body-worn camera videos. Some cases take a lot of time, but the preparation needed and the report writing needed for doing an officer interview, and all the preparation, getting it scheduled, getting the officer in, doing all the preparation work, that saves a lot of time when we can do almost 100 fewer officer interviews in a year. I think that's one of the factors that we mentioned in our annual report, and that's one of the things that's really helping us out on keeping our caseload down to our clearance rate down to around 90 days, and the number of open cases down to really around 100 right now as an average. And if we can keep that up through the completion of this pandemic, knowing that we're an investigator short still, and knowing that we don't have any investigator interns to help us out right now, if we can keep that up, that's really a good sign of us going forward. Of course, this is all dependent on what our actual jurisdiction and job description will be after the Police Reform Commission comes out and talks to the DC Council. But as it stands now, we're in really good shape, and it's taken us several years to get to this point, but it's really showing right now that we're under a great deal of operational stress in our investigations, both from the pandemic and from the emphasis on police reform right now. And amidst all of those things going on in the background, we're really keeping up on the investigation section, really doing a great job of keeping up with that. So that's one of the main things I wanted to mention on the annual report. So thank you for that, Mona. The other thing I wanted to mention is, even though we have a temporary blip in reduction of complaints, it's really not statistically significant, but really over the last 4 years, every year we've seen a rise in the number of complaints by about 3 to 5% every year, and that's continued for the last 4 years. And even though the last 2 months it went down a notch, maybe 3% or so. We'll see how the year ends up. And I'm kind of anxious to see what happens with those numbers once things are all calmed down with the pandemic and with all the police oversight scrutiny that's going on right now. The other main factors that I want to mention, and I'm not going to go through the annual report because I know all of you probably already at least scanned through it, but I just wanted to highlight two, that with respect to body-worn cameras, we're still getting about a third of our BWC cases in which there is at least one non-compliance issue with body-worn cameras. And that's been pretty consistent over the last few years, ever since the rollout. Actually, there's been some fluctuation, a few percentage points here and there, but the vast majority of that non-compliance still remains to be something that we brought up when cameras first came out, and that is that officers are not telling the community member that their camera is on and that they're being recorded. So the last time I brought that up with the chief, and that was the previous chief at the time, it was viewed as a non-issue, and they really weren't concerned with it. So with the new administration, I'll push that again one more time and see where that goes. But overall, though, it's very good compliance compared with some other places that we've seen. And if that's the major reason, that's good. What I have seen with the police department is when there are instances where it appears that there was an intentional issue with BWC, that is not turning it on at all, in a case in which we have a complaint, and then we look at the officer's BWC activity for the rest of that shift, and we see that he or she had their BWC on for every incident before and after that one that we got the complaint on. And they always have their camera on, except for that one time that we got a complaint. There we look at that non-compliance as a potential intentional non-compliance and not turning the camera on because they knew something was going to go down, some type of misconduct. So those type of cases, I bring those to the attention of internal affairs individually. They are few and far between. I can think of 2 of them right now over the past year. But I bring those to their attention, and they deal with them a lot more strictly than a lot of the other BWC violations. So we do have that going for us. So those are some of the main things that I wanted to just highlight. There's a lot of things in that annual report. It's really a great job that Rochelle and our new research analyst, who is not with us tonight, put together. It's a lot of work. But it's really the most front-facing part of our operations is that annual report that we put out. Many people judge us as an agency based on that report, so we really like to do a good and thorough job, and I think I'm very confident that we did that again this year, thanks to the hard work of all those people. And it was more people too on this call too that had input into their various sections of the annual report. So I just wanted to say thank you for everybody for working on the report. And I wanted to invite any questions from the board members about the annual report, if you have any.
I don't have any particularly about the annual report. Thank you to everyone who contributed to it. Rochelle and the research. Remind me the name of the research analyst. I feel like she's relatively new, correct?
Yes, that's Marissa is her name. Marissa, yeah.
Marissa Landai.
Yes.
Okay.
She came to us, her first day was October 27th.
Oh, wow,
So
okay.
she started the report that week, and she's amazing. So I'm very happy with her. The whole 1.5 data team, with the assistance of the staff, knocked it out pretty fast. So we're on a good track.
Great.
Can Mr. Tobin give an update on the use of force report? Just the status. Usually we try to get that out by March because it includes MPD's calendar year data, even though we work on fiscal year. Data-wise, MPD works off the calendar year. Marissa's already on it. We could have a draft out by March, or at least a draft to you all by March. However, we're still waiting for MPD to give us all the data from 2020. We had asked for it by January 15th, and so I don't know where we're at, but in the next week or so, we'll deal with all those things and the other things that were pending, and then it should be within a month or two of the data. So we're on a roll with that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And someday, if we ever have direct access to MPD data, we won't have any of those issues anymore. Maybe
It's a hint to you, Kurt.
Kurt.
I'll comment on that. The access has actually got worse since we started this with use of force. We used to have a direct line to the person who had access to the data. Now we have to go through inspectors, civilians, like 4 or 5 people before we get to that person. Those are the people that hold it up. But if I go directly to the person, just give the courtesy of the other 4 people, I get it. So if you need to comment on that, that would help us.
Was this a change in policy, or just kind of started happening?
You're muted.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know. Matt, the first research analyst, when we started, they were very forthcoming. We used to get the data every month. That OPC liaison left, and in between getting then the next OPC liaison was civilians, and now they still are civilians, and then they go to their supervisors go to their supervisors, and then it makes it assistant chief. So I don't know why or how, but they've included the new civilians for us in the data. There's 5 layers before we actually get to the data people now. And I don't actually have clarity on that because they didn't tell me, but I know 2 civilians, inspector, and assistant chief, or a lieutenant, then an assistant chief, and then the data people.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And these are not new problems with respect to us over the last since the organization was founded 20 years ago. These are access problems that are common to us and every oversight agency, and one of the main reasons is we don't have direct access. Every time there's a change of administration, somebody changes a position, and assistant chief is reassigned, sometimes we just start from the beginning again and building up the networking and working out all the kinks, because the department's knee-jerk reaction is to say no to everything that we want. And then we have to work through that, and then we get to a good place again, and then something changes. So it's an endless cycle. We will get through this again, but there are ways to permanently fix it.
Again, looking at you, Kurt.
Yeah.
I do have a couple questions, not necessarily related to the annual report, just a few other things. Have you met, Mike, with the new chief yet?
I have not, no. Not since he's been the chief, no.
Okay. I was just curious if you've met and sort of what you anticipate the relationship being with Chief Conti.
No, I think my next meeting is scheduled the next week or 2.
Okay.
So we'll find out then. I can give a report at that point.
The other question I have, and I know you and I had touched base on this, I think when we talked, a week or so ago, the police reform legislations, they still haven't passed permanent legislation, correct?
Right.
So have you had communication with MODA or anyone sort of related to what that means for Commander Kane's seat?
I have not asked them, because my assumption is that a person continues to serve until either they resign, or B, the replacement is appointed. I can ask Morgan. I'll be seeing her next week. We have a meeting a force meeting that she's usually at. Force review meeting. I can ask her if she's at that meeting. But if that's the assumption I'm acting on, is that, and I'm also acting on the assumption that the last I heard was the DC Council was going to put that back on the agenda to permanent legislation, either late this month or in February, and some action was going to be taken on it. So we may have an answer on that even, relatively soon. I hope we do. But until then, my guidance is just based on my own knowledge and assumptions about how things have worked in the past and how it generally works for vacancies. And that we are going to continue working as a board even if we only have 4 members, because then we will still have a quorum, even though the numbers are reduced, until the council takes permanent action and starts making the appointments. I don't anticipate them making any new appointments until the legislation is permanent, and assuming that will be in the permanent legislation too.
Mike, I think that's a good assumption. I guess if you're talking to Moda about other things, you might inquire that in anticipation of permanent legislation, if they've started the work in identifying candidates for the 5 other seats they will have. I mean, that's a lot of work, and my fear is that if they don't start at all until after legislation is passed, it's going to take forever to fill up the board.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Curry. That's good information. I'll bring that up. I have been approached regarding other board appointments, not the PCB, but there's other board appointments that's going to be under the new legislation. Members of the Use of Force Review Board, there's going to be new people on that, and there's going to be new people on a reconstituting of the post-police officers training board. And I've been asked about possible appointments on that, but I have not, by coincidence, been asked about the PCB yet. So they are working on some of them, but I will bring it to their attention for our board too.
But that's a lot of citizens all at the same time who have to find qualified people to serve on these various boards, and haven't been particularly good at, just when it was the PCB, of quickly moving candidates. So I have a serious concern that when they have to do the post board, they have to do the use of force board, they have to do an expanded PCB board, that they're just not going to find people in the community who are qualified rapidly.
Sounds like that's coming from the concern of someone that's been a holdover for the past 4 years. I appreciate that, Kurt.
Is it just 4, Kurt? I thought it was longer than that.
God only knows.
Jeff, have you heard from Moda? Because your term was up January 12th.
I know. I have not heard anything either.
Jeff, we can't afford to lose anyone. We have to find new people. So
Yeah.
I might do what they did to me and just vote on it before I even know there's a hearing.
That's probably what's going to happen. Because, Jeff, I think you filled in for someone else, like a partial term, so this would be a full term, first full term for you, if they renewed you.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's fine. Yeah, I'm certainly happy to stay on. Just hadn't heard anything. And I let Mike know that when I saw that. I thought my term was ending up, and he said, "Oh, you just stay on until they figure something out." So wait and see.
Yeah, we're not letting anyone go. So,
speaking of going, colleagues, I have to jump off from my other meeting, so I apologize. But remember, you have a quorum until someone notices the absence. So I will see you later.
Bye, Kurt. Thank you. The only other question I think I have off the top of my head is, correct me if I'm wrong here, Darlene is still with OPC, right? So what is her new role?
Darlene is Kim.
Darlene replaced Kim. Darlene's a new staff assistant for my side of the shop. It was actually an internal promotion, a very good promotion for her, and then we backfilled her investigative clerk promotion.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful. I knew she was still there. Well, at least I had a strong assumption she was still there. I just couldn't remember what the role was. But, okay.
That concludes my board report, and I'll be business I had to present.
Unless there is anything else, we could move to adjourn. Okay, I so move. I move to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Sure.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous with the current quorum that we have. Yeah, the meeting is adjourned at 6:34.